Welcome everyone to the webinar on biodiversity and agriculture, which is organized by the BovINE project. So first, the BovINE project, in short, BovINE stands for Beef Innovation Network Europe, and it's a thematic network project, which means that we are not doing the research ourselves, but we try to connect research and beef farmers better. This we do by collecting the needs from the farmer each year, and based on these needs, we select the priority topics we will work on for the next year. So within the BovINE project, 9 regions are participating. You can see the flags underneath. And from each region, we have a sector organization and a research institute. And together we try to collect the good practices and research innovations. This is our main knowledge that we have. And the main platform that we share everything is our BovINE Knowledge Hub. You can see a QR code that is bringing you directly to this hub. And next to the BovINE Knowledge Hub, we also organize demonstrations, webinars, workshops. This can be regional or also more international. And this to share our knowledge and also to show how innovation can be implemented into practice. So we work on 4 thematic areas: socioeconomic resilience, animal health and welfare, environmental sustainability, and production efficiency and meat quality. I am the work package leader of environmental sustainability, and this webinar is linked to the topic methods to enhance biodiversity on beef cattle farms without the need for large investments. So the agenda for today, I will start with a short introduction to the webinar. Next, Robert Schepers from RLSD will talk about the protection of meadow birds and wildlife-friendly mowing techniques in Flanders. Then José Pereira from Palombar will talk about birds of prey and agriculture, and Jane de Bode from ILVO will finish the webinar talking about the soil food web, which is linked to soil biodiversity. At the end of the webinar, we will go over the Q&A. So don't hesitate to ask your questions. You can do this on the right of your screen in the question box. So biodiversity includes not only animals and plants, but also microorganisms in the ecosystem, and also the interaction between all these ecosystems. Biodiversity, however, is under pressure from human activity, including also agricultural systems and high nutrient loads. Of course, it's not only agriculture that is putting pressure on biodiversity, but within this webinar, we will focus on those two. So nowadays, agricultural systems are often focused on monocultural crops and the most intensive possible cultivation of the lands. However, agriculture is also putting under pressure by various diseases and pests, pollution and droughts. And biodiversity can play an important role in this, as it has also mitigating effects in this respect. It's therefore important to show farmers that more diverse farming systems can also bring productivity benefits. And we already see more collaboration between conservation organizations and farmers, with also an improved productivity and biodiversity in and around the farms. But how can we collaborate? The next 2 speakers will talk about the collaboration between agriculture and nature organizations, and the 3rd speaker will show the influence of agriculture on the soil food web, which is important for soil health. So now I will give the floor to Robert, who will talk about meadow birds and mowing techniques.
Thank you. My presentation is visible?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Riet. I am Robert Schepers and I work for Regional Landscape Schelde-Durme. I'm a biologist there, and I will tell you a bit more indeed about the protection of meadowbirds and some wildlife-friendly mowing techniques that we use in some grasslands in the Scheldt Valley in Flanders. So I'll give you a short, brief explanation about meadowbirds and how we are working around them, how regional landscapes work as partnerships, with an example from a concrete example in the region. I will give an overview of some actions and wildlife-friendly mowing techniques, and I will end with some challenges and successes from the last 2 years of our project. So yeah, who are they, the meadowbirds? Probably a lot of you have seen or know some of the birds that are here on the slide. Meadowbirds are actually birds that make their nests on the ground, mostly in farmlands, grasslands, or sometimes arable fields. So actually there are also farmland birds. These are the birds that occur in Flanders, so the northern part of Belgium, and we focus on the black-tailed godwit and the lapwing in our region. Actors who work on the protection of meadowbirds in Flanders are agencies of the Flemish government on the right side of this slide, some nature organizations, Boeren Natuur, that's an organization that searches for the link between farmers and nature and regional landscapes where I work for. And the most projects about meadowbird protection are in Flanders in nature reserves, but there are quite a lot of smaller initiatives outside these reserves, so in the farmland. Since last year, the Flemish government also has a special species protection program for meadowbirds, where the black-tailed godwit and the curlew are the headliners. So yeah, with project around meadowbirds, we help also with the Flemish activities around them. So regional landscapes. I work for regional landscapes Schelde-Durme, that is situated here around between Ghent and Antwerp in the valley of the river Scheldt. But in Flanders, we have like 16 of the same organization in their own regions. And thanks to the quite unique composition of our boards, we are actually partnerships on our own. So our boards exist of representatives of farmers, hunters, local nature organizations, tourism organizations, local governments, and provinces. And this drawing actually shows the typical way of working. So we bring different stakeholders together around the table or in the field to realize projects concentrated around nature, landscape, and heritage. And I think that's quite unique in Europe. And this is the map of the region where we work around the protection of meadowbirds. It's situated between Ghent and Antwerp, where you see on the blue line is the river Scheldt. Most of the valley there is existing on some of grasslands, wet grasslands, and some arable fields. In this region, in the orange clusters, we have around 40 breeding pairs of black-tailed godwit. The green zones or nature, and green and blue zones or nature 2000 zones. But for our project, where I'll talk about today, we focus mainly on the small area that is not protected. And there, in that region of that area, we have a mosaic of grasslands that are under nature management by a nature organization, Biodiversity, but also the majority is normally used farmlands with approximately 25 farmers active there. And most of them are dairy farmers, but also some bee farmers and horse farmers. And as you can see, On the map, the dots here are the breeding pairs or nests from 2020 when we started this project. We have around 10 breeding pairs of black-tailed godwits and 40 of lapwings there, and more than 90% actually nests on the farmland, so on the fields from the farmers. So in order to protect these birds in this situation, because the normally used grasslands are mowed quite early, so the nest can be damaged then. So we actually tried to make a partnership to protect them together. And we do that with the local farmers and farmer associations, Boerenatuur Vlaanderenes organization, the local hunters, the local nature organization, and local government and province. And in this partnership, we undertake several actions. One of them is searching nests by volunteers on farmland. You see here the picture of this spring where we did a course to volunteers, hunters and also farmers on how to find and protect nests of the lapwing. In grasslands, we use a drone with a thermal camera, especially for the nests of black-tailed godwit. That's very useful because they are often very hard to find in the perennial ryegrass. They are really like sometimes under the grass, and it's not easy to find them by yourself with the eye. It is possible, but it takes a lot of time. So this drone helps very a lot for the efficiency. And when we find nests, we protect them on different manners. And one of them is to indicate them so that the farmers can mow around them and save the nests. On arable fields, they can go around them, or we can use baskets to move the nest between the field works. The farmers sometimes do it themselves, sometimes it's with the volunteers. And for protection of the nest like this, the farmers get a compensation of 50 euros per nest. Small zones of protection, like you saw there, 10 on 10 meters, is quite small, and it makes nests still vulnerable for predation by foxes or other predators. So if farmers can delay mowing of a bigger piece of grassland or the whole grassland, it's better, but it's not always easy for the farmer. But if they can do that, they can get a compensation for delayed mowing until the 22nd of June. And it can go by agri-environmental schemes when they get a compensation about 700 euros per hectare in Belgium or in Flanders. And one of the most important challenges in protection of meadowbirds is the survival of the young birds, not only the nests, but you have to see that you have enough young birds to have a sustainable population. And that's why we try to increase the amount of flowery grassland, because more flowers means more insects and more food for the chicks. So by stopping or using less fertilizing and 2 times mowing in the year from half May, you can get there, and farmers can get a compensation about 900 euros per hectare. And the result after 2 years of the project now is quite good. You see here a map with where you see the mosaic between delayed mowing grasslands in yellow and development flowery grasslands by farmers in blue and purple, mixed with the green fields that are under a nature management. So this mosaic will really help the local populations there. One challenge is that in the most areas next to the river Scheldt, the water management is not yet good or not climate proof, because there's still a focus on lower winter and spring levels. And yeah, especially with the droughts of the last years, it becomes a problem, because imagine that you're a black-tailed godwit and you have to find food by probing into the soil for worms, and the clay gets very hard when it's dry, so you won't find any food anymore. So that's why we try to use pumps to create flooded areas, awaiting a better management on the regional scale. Farmers can also get compensations for that, or can be refunded for the purchase of pumps if they want to do it themselves. Because we had a lot of predation last year, we also tested with some temporary electrical fences around nests. This is a drone picture of an electrical fence. And yeah, we also try to test different types of wildlife-friendly mowing techniques. So one of the things is that we go together with the hunters, we try to scare wildlife away before mowing, by going through the grass or putting bamboo sticks with plastic bags that flutter in the wind. So families with chicks move to the next fields. We promote the use of acoustic wildlife savers. These are systems that make a loud and high-pitched sound to scare wildlife away. And as we heard from the farmers, it works very well for mammals like hares, but it's less for birds that stay sitting on the nest like pheasants. It's not sufficient. So that's why we wanted to test an existing system that's used in other regions. It's a kind of mechanic wildlife saver, and exists of a metal bar with chains that goes through the grass. And a very important measure is the mowing scheme and the speed. So in the project here, a lot of farmers are learning to mow from the inside to the outside, because the other thing is the most used scheme. But going from inside to outside leads the wildlife to the edges of the field and not to the center. And also lower speeds are very important to have less victims, and also the not mowing at night is quite important. During agriculture operations, we also try to save puli, so the small chicks, because otherwise they still get squashed sometimes under the machines, because they just go laying on the ground if they are scared. And we also try to avoid victims on the roads next to the fields, by intending rural roads to slow down agricultural traffic in cooperation with the local government. And then, another important aspect is raising public awareness through guided tours, info boards, articles in local press. And this year, we also issued the Golden Black-tailed Godwit Award in appreciation for the effort of the farmers. So this year, André Roels won the Golden Godwit Award. So here I'm at the end with the challenges and successes, and I will begin with the challenges. And these are water management and drought. There are serious challenges nowadays in the wet grassland areas. Also convincing dairy farmers for delayed mowing and use of less fertilizer is not always easy. Also for them to adapt it in the schemes or the measurements in their business is it takes some time and things to look at. The scale is very important. It's really important to focus on a certain scale and region, to combine a lot of measurements together and not to take one measurement there and 2 kilometers further a measurement there. So you really have to scale it up on a local scale. Budget and long-term financing is not always easy. Nest protection is very time-consuming but rewarding. Yeah, the ecological trap of nests of birds like black-tailed godwit that really also always make their nest in the most intensive used fields is quite challenging. Predation is challenging, and then the thing that we don't have really exact data on how many chicks really survive it until the end. Is not easy to measure. Disturbing through recreational area by recreation in small area, and the national coordination and knowledge exchange on a regional scale in Flanders is also still a challenge. But the successes are also big, and the important thing is that there's really a lot of local enthusiasm, interest, and willingness to work together, especially among the farmers. More than 90% participates in the project, and that we and Boerenatuur are, yeah, it works that we work as an independent go-between to bring every partner together, and we really save a nice amount of nests that would be otherwise lost, and the population of black-tailed godwits stays stable. In the last 20 years, and in other regions it gets down, and we raise the public awareness. So thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, we'll see that at the end of this webinar.
Thank you, Robert, for the presentation. So the next speaker is Jose Pereira. So the floor is yours, Jose.
Hi, are you seeing my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much for the invitation to the organization and to the BovINE network. I will be presenting a project that has started this year. Wait, just because I'm not being able to see my screen. Okay. So I will be presenting a project that we accomplished to start this year. I will be focusing on the campaign of 2022 and some of the achievements achieved. I'm having here. Okay. So the project name is Syria Fields with Biodiversity, Save the Montagos Area. Here are my contacts. You are kind to keep them, and whenever you want, you can contact us for further questions. And the Montagos area is a bird of prey that is typical from the meadowlands and cereal crops, and it has a national conservation status established in 2005 as in danger. The global status provided by OICN is from 2004, and it's of less concern. Nevertheless, in the last 2 years, the work done among several partners have allowed to estimate an 80% population decline in the last 10 years, where the population is present. So it's a summer migrant in Portugal. They breed from the 3rd year of life. They nest in the ground, usually in the meadows, wet and oat crops, and tend to be colonial, generally concentrating most nests in a few plots. In Portugal, there are two main regions where the population is distributed. These areas are critical for its conservation and are mainly agricultural lands. And most of my presentation will focus on the work done in the northeast of Portugal, where Palombar is active in the conservation context and operational in the field. It's a species that depends almost exclusively on crops for food and reproduction. The start of incubation of eggs usually occurs in April or in the beginning of May. Sometimes when they lost their first nestlings or eggs, they can make a second or even a third posture. The incubation period of the eggs are around 29 days, a month more or less, and the hatchling full development is completed at 55 days. It's a species that is a bird of prey. It hunts, and it's seen as helpful and benefiting farmers and ecosystems as a free service. It ensures the maintenance of these services, or ecosystem services. It's an excellent hunter and ally in the control of agricultural pests. It feeds on small rodent mammals, reptiles, insects, and sometimes small birds. And farmers play a key role in protecting these species. It's estimated that during a breeding season, a couple of these species can ingest more than 1,000 animals that are harmful for agriculture, such as mice and mouse, crickets, and other pests like these ones. So tackling the conservation of these species is quite special, and this species is used to be on traditional cereal cultivation associated with cultural rotation, which promotes the habitat biodiversity. In Europe, it is in the extensive agricultural areas that there is a huge and greatest diversity of birds, and concretely threatened birds are found in these habitats. In these ecosystems, 70% of the birds have unfavorable conservation status. So I have these graphics such to see that in Portugal, for example, there is the intensification of agriculture, which is leading to the replacement of dry land agriculture by permanent pasture lands. And we can see throughout the years that the number of arable lands are being replaced by permanent pasture lands and meadows. So as the grain production and the grain crops decline and the pasture lands increase, there we can also see an increase in the bovine effective production. So there is a relation, a direct relation within these when we tackle this situation. So we can see that the landscape simplification with the conversion of cereal cultivation into forage and pasture production for catch-all production and feeding. So when we tackle the threats and we identify the threats, we can see that the management of these pasture lands and the production of forage crops are conflicting with the nesting birds, since they are coincident in the most sensitive period of reproduction of these birds. So the harvests the harvest of eggs are right on the time when these birds have the eggs or the nestlings. And besides the direct impact of the harvesting in these animals, we can also see and register that there is an increase on predation because they are more exposed to predators such as storks and other birds of prey, and it's a huge impact on the population. There are several threats such as monocultures, transformation of the ecosystems, the use of agrochemicals, forestation, the woody crops expansion, disturbance and poaching, several threats that these birds are targeted. So in this context, it has been formalized the partnership between these four entities that aims to enhance the cultivation of wheat and other grain cereals for ornithological biodiversity and enhancing it for the conservation of birds, in particular for species that in danger of extinction, such as the Montagues harrier. It is intended also to sensitize rural communities to the importance of avifauna. So Palombar is a ONG of environment for the protection of environment and wildlife conservation. AMPOC is a National Association of Cereal Producers. CBU is a research center of biodiversity, and Palombar I have presented. So, and we also have in this partnership Continent Producers Club, which I believe it's a member of the BovINE network, which is a big structure from the group SONAI that distributes food and other needs for the people. It's a supermarket, and these club producers aims to be supporting the farmers and acquiring national production. So the project has several actions. I will talk some of them. I will start, since there was a little knowledge on the distribution and occurrence and the abundance of the species. In 2022, we started the first national census of the population. We have reached several areas, and we almost completed the sampling of 60 square 10 per 10 kilometers, involving more than 80 persons. At the same time, we started the rescue and the protection actions in cereal production areas. For that, we need to monitor and follow the harvesting season. We have technicians on the field 24 hours, almost 7 days of the week, trying to search the nests, to contact the agricultures and farmers and owners, and to get in contact with them so they can connect with us and say when they are going to harvest, so we can follow and take measures and actions for the conservation of the bird. So we have two procedures while we are monitoring the nests and the harvest is starting. If the nest have eggs, we start a rescue program where we collect the eggs and take them to other partners so they can incubate and raise these animals. If the nests have nestlings, we promote the implementation of protection fences so that similar to my previous colleague, the farmers when they're harvesting, they can identify where the nest is and go around the nest. the monitoring of the nest is also done with the drone. For the rescue and hatching and breeding in captivity, and for veterinary medical support, we reinforced our partnership with the Rescue Center of Wildlife of the Veterinary Hospital of the Academy of the University. And we also reinforced the partnership with authorities of conservation and wildlife conservation as facilitators and supporters of all actions. So this year we have rescued 34 eggs among 11 nests, 5 nestlings, and we have delivered in the hospital 27 eggs individuals. In the Wildlife Rescue Center, it's done a very good job raising and incubating and raising these nestlings, which then while we collect information on the reproductive failure in the field and interviewing the farmers and all of that, and we had to construct and maintain an acclimatization cage for transfer these nestlings that have been raised in captivity in the Wildlife Rescue Center, and they are transferred to these infrastructures that are located in near the colonies in the crop fields. So all this work is done with a lots of monitoring and surveillance of the animals that are being in the acclimatization phase in the cage. So we have to feed them. Since they are birds of prey, we have to be sure that these birds are able to hunt, and for that we provide live food as crickets and other insects, mice, mouse, and we also to promote the learning of interspecific behaviors such as hunting and learning threats. We we put in the cage with the nestlings and juveniles adults that are not able to be delivered into the nature and that are kept in the rescue center for this purpose. So there is a huge need to understand the problem of the conservation of these species in these agricultural lands, and for that we are tagging with rings, color rings, and metallic rings, and also tagging them with GPS loggers, so that we can have the movements of these birds. For example, this bird was a nestling. He started to fly near the nest. It's a wild one, and we have seen the death of this bird quite near the nest, and the reason of the mortality of this bird, this specific bird, was of a severe dehydration that was led by the severe drought that we are facing here in Portugal and in Europe. So all of this must be all this conservation work is followed by education and awareness raising campaigns. For that, we promote in the small villages, we promote meetings and actions with farmers and other local agents, so that we can engage them in the protection and conservation of this bird. And for example, when they see during the harvesting, we suggest that they can be alert, and if they observe any bird, we want them to try to locate the nest and contact us so that we can make our monitoring, protection, or rescuing these nestlings or birds. So we try to them allow us to install safety protections around the nests or to rescue the nestlings. So we also need to work this on a political level, and Palombar, along with other partners, have worked to propose agro-environmental measure in the strategic plan of the Common Agriculture Policy that has been presented this year by our national government to the European Union. And our proposal was that has been collected and has been submitted to the European Union, is that any cereal crop with at least 1 hectare that has a nest of this species can be supported with 250 euros per hectare. Of course, these values are no longer interesting for the farmer's point of view, since the prices are being too high because of the war that we all are aware. So the objective is to compensate farmers for the loss of income resulting from implementing such practice of protection of these birds. So in that sense, we are also promoting a network of farmers that are friends of Montagu's areas, to promote the networking, to promote contact with all these organizations. And we are producing materials, certificates, etc., to deliver them and to make them to feel a part of the project and to be a part of the conservation of the species. I leave here a special thanks to all the farmers that have been engaged and working with us. Our partner Club de Produtores Continente is also developing a consumer marketing campaign to reach the consumers. It's being developed a communication plan for the consumers, valuing the producer and the farmer, and promoting sustainable cereal products. In the next Friday, we will be promoting a communication event also to celebrate all the results achieved and disseminate these results from this 2022 campaign. We will be opening the climatization cage where the juveniles that are ready to be delivered into the wild. And we will be formalizing more memberships of farmers into this network. Thanks to these partnerships, 7 tons of wheat flour is used daily in the bakeries of continent stores that come from fields in the Alentejo and Trás-os-Montes regions, which are monitored in order to protect the biodiversity and conservation of this bird. Thank you all for listening. I apologize for my rusty English, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jose, and you were perfectly understandable. So now we have Jane, who will talk about the soil food web. Just a quick reminder, if you have questions, you can ask them in the question box you can see on the right, and then at the end of the webinar, we will go over all the questions. So Jane, the floor is yours.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, but we see the
okay.
presenter mode.
Yeah.
So above you can change.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
So indeed, I will talk about soil today. And in the last year, soil gets more and more attention. So you probably know or don't know, but in 2005, it was even the International Year of Soils. And each year we have a World Soil Day, the 5th of December. And I really want to start this presentation with two nice phrases. First one is of the FAO. In 2015, they launched this phrase for the International Year of Soil, where they say soil is where food begins. And another phrase is launched by the European Commission when they are presenting their soil mission calls, and they are saying caring for soil is caring for life. My name is James Bode. I'm a colleague of Rits at ILVO, and I work as a senior scientist at the plant sciences unit. And practically soil can be divided in three parts: the chemical properties, the physical and the biological properties. But of course, they all are very well interconnected and they influence each other. But for the chemical properties, I think farmers know them really well and measure them, and they are easy to measure, like nitrogen, pH, and it's really a well-known indicator. Whereas for biological properties, I think we are still in the beginning, and I already have to say now, and to be honest, that until today, there are no easily available and easily measurable biological indicators that are practically used by farmers. But today I will at least show some of the techniques we use in research, and I hope in the coming years there will be this information will be translated to be easily available bioindicators for soil health. So everything that's below the soil, all life that's below the soil, we call it the soil food web. And so there we start with the smallest one, are the fungi, the bacteria, or the soil microbiome. And then we go a little bit bigger to the nematodes. And then the nematodes are eaten by the arthropods. And then we have this link to the previous presentation. So arthropods can be eaten by birds. And then the biggest are the animals that are present. But today I will only talk about the microbiome and the nematodes, as this is the biggest expertise in our lab. And this picture you see here, it's printed in a recent review that's been written by two of my colleagues, Caroline de Tender and Lisa Joos. And the review is called Soil Under Stress. So the soil gets a lot of stress, but in the introduction, they summarize the main function of the soil food web. So, and the first function is the carbon sequestration. Second one is the nutrient cycling, and third is the formation of the soil structure, as you can see here. So I all advise you, if you're interested, please read this nice review. As soils are under stress at ILVO or all over the world, of course, they do research how to improve soil life in agriculture soils. And the first, most obvious one is to use soil amendments such as compost, biochar, slurry. And this has been studied a lot in an European project called Fertiplus in the past. Then other measurements have the purpose to reduce the stress on the soil. So, for example, if you reduce tillage, it's good for your soil life. If you reduce compaction, it's also good to improve your soil life. And then all cover or all cropping systems where you avoid monoculture, such as cover crops, intercropping, strip cropping, are beneficial for soil life. And here, this last one, so this crop types, especially the intercropping and the strip cropping, has been studied in an European project of Core Organic in Zurich. Has ended today, and on the website you can find some main results there. Of course, for the audience today, I think the most important way of looking at it is the correlation between soil life and cattle. And during the preparation of this presentation, I found this very nice review in Frontiers, where they state that there in fact are three environments: the plant microbiome, the animal rumens, and the soil microbiome. And they say, okay, they are all three well studied in the past, but the correlation between the three still needs a lot of, the correlation and interaction between the three It still needs a lot of research, and they propose some interesting ways of thinking and ways of research. So I think in the coming years there will be more and more to know about these three interactions. But I'm a soil scientist and a plant scientist, so today I will only talk about soil microbiomes. So how do we measure them in research, and do we see a time and depth effect on the soil microbiome? And we also did some studies on the effect of slurry and compost on the soil microbiome and the correlation with plant health. So first, how do we measure soil microbiome? Because you can only do research if you are able to measure the soil microbiome. And the first technique we use is quite an older technique. It's called phospholipid fatty acid analysis. So in all live fatty acids are present. And here you measure specific fatty acids that are present in 6 microbial groups: the actinomycetes, the gram-negative bacteria, the gram-positive bacteria, the non-specific bacteria, fungi, and mycorrhizae. With this technique, you can really measure the amount, so the microbial biomass that's present in the soil. And I will illustrate this technique with an example study of a colleague of mine, Negin Abrahimi. It was published already some years ago, and she studied the effect of soil amendments on the soil microbiome. And these soil amendments were slurry, compost, biochar, and mineral fertilizer. And she also tried to find a correlation with plant health, and the crop she was working on is potato. So here you see, this is the soil microbiomass on this axis, and here you see all the amendments they use as compared to the non-amended soil. And then you see that all the slurries and most of the compost had a positive effect, so increased the soil microbial biomass. Increase the soil microbial biomass. Then she tried to find a correlation with plant health. So what she was looking at how sensitive the plants were to cyst nematode called Globodera, 2 types of cyst nematodes, and she looked at the amount of nematodes that could enter the roots. And then you see that for the slurry applications, there was a negative effect on these bad nematodes, so they increased the plant health. But there was no perfect correlation, so there were also amendments that did increase the microbial biomass, but also had a positive, did not increase it, but had a positive effect on the plant health. Then another technique that's nowadays more and more used to study soil microbiome is metabarcoding. It's a DNA-based technique. And the difference with the PLFA technique is that you can't measure the biomass, so you can only measure relative abundances of bacteria and fungi. So you always have to use this technique by comparing different samples. You cannot measure one single sample and say, okay, so many bacteria and fungi are present. But the advantage of this technique that you can go much deeper. So you can go up to family or even genus level. And you can also measure the bacterial and fungal diversity. Again, I will illustrate this technique with a study of a PhD student in our group. And she used this technique to measure the effect of compost application in the field over time, and to measure the diversity, the bacterial and fungal diversity over time and depth. So she analyzed the soil each month of a whole year. And of course, yeah, there are a lot of environmental effects on a field. So you have the weather, you have the time effect, the depth, and so on. So here I show you the results of the bacterial families. So if we look at the time effect, you see that for 2 bacterial families, there was a time effect. So here you have much more relative abundance of these 2 families as compared to 1 year later. And I think, although this might seem very obvious, I think it's a very important result, because in a lot of studies, they only look at 1 or 2 time points, and this can give not a good view of what's happening, because you see that even if you don't do anything on the soil, just by the environmental effects and the crop effects, you see a change in your bacterial families. for these two families, she didn't see any effect on the use of compost. When you look at two other bacterial families, you clearly see an effect of compost. So you see an enzyme effect and treatment effect. Then, as I said, you can also look at diversity with this technique. And here she measured the effect of compost and no compost, but also on two different depths in the soil. And there she saw that there was again no effect of compost, but the diversity and the deeper soil layer is more stable than in the upper soil layer. Then from the soil microbes, I go to the group that's a little bit bigger, but still very, very small. These are the nematodes in the soil. How do we measure nematodes in the soil? So this is at ILVO. We have this special machine, as you see here. It's called the Orpheus, or it's a kind of zonal centrifuge. So the centrifuge is a small thing here. And so the soil sample enters here. Here, a little bit, and sorry, here, I don't know what's happening. Here, and so, and then it goes to the centrifuge, and then in the end you get a watery solution where the nematodes are present, and then you leave the nematodes on your bench, so they go to the below of your recipients, and then you can count how much nematodes you have. So it's you can measure the biomass of your nematodes. But to know which nematodes are present, then you go deeper and then you make a glass slide, as you see here, and have to look at the microscope and do a morphological identification. So nematodes are not so easy, so you have to be a real expert to this morphological identification. But in recent years, they also go more and more to these DNA-based techniques, because to avoid a little bit this highly expertise that's needed to do this morphological identification. Again, I will try to illustrate this technique with a pilot study of my colleague, Lieven Weinberger. He studied the nematode population in 5 fields, including an organic and vegetable production field and a grassland field. And as I already said, nematodes are really complicated to identify and have to be a big specialist, but basically, you can divide nematodes based on their feeding type and their lifestyle. So their feeding type, they can eat bacteria, so then they are bacteriovores. If they eat fungi, they are fungivores. If they eat plants, they are herbivores. If they eat other nematodes, they are predators, and they can also be omnivores. And you can see this all based on their the way they feed, so on the kind of mount of the nematodes. And another thing you want to also have to identify whether they are a colonizer or persister, and you have 5 classes in this. But I don't go into detail because it's highly specialized. But if you have these two types or styles, you can classify your soil into 4 groups. And the first group is a highly disturbed soil. The second group is a low to moderate disturbed soil. The third group is a stressed soil. And the fourth group is an undisturbed soil. So, but for agriculture soil, they are mainly in the first or the second group. So this is my colleague Lieven, who did the study. And as you can see that for the 5 fields he studied, that 2 fields, the organic fields and the mainly grassland fields, are already a little bit to the second part. It means that the soil is more healthy. But of course, this is only a pilot study. It's a very limited amount of fields, only 5. So it's more to show you how it works than to really make statistically sound conclusions about which type of agricultural practices are influencing the soil to a better soil health. So, and that's also why I want to invite you to go to the website of a new project. This is the Sol di Verano project. It's a big European project with a lot of partners. And there the project is still going on, but there they are looking at fields, agricultural fields all over Europe. And they are looking to both nematodes and microbiomes and to find an answer which type of land management can improve soil health. But this project is still going on, and I think within the next 2 years, a lot of results will be present on the website. And I'll invite you to go to this website and follow their progress in the project. So finally, I want to conclude a little bit what the small example studies done at ILVO show is that in the first study, we showed that slurry application increases the soil microbial biomass in a pot trial, and that there was a correlation with improved plant health. Then in a field trial, the soil microbiome changes over time and depth, independent of any treatment, and the compost application affects specific microbial families. And then in a small-scale pilot study, 2 agriculture systems, grassland and organic farmer, have a positive effect on the nematodes community. So thank you, and I will be happy to answer questions in the chat, I think, in a moment.
Thank you, Jane, for the presentation. I see that already a few questions are coming in. Maybe we can start with the questions related to the first presentations. So first question is for Robert. Would the farmers get compensation for later mowing, regardless of the weather being suitable or not for the activity?
For the first of all, the compensations that we gave the last 2 years are the same as the agri-environmental schemes by the government, because the last 2 years were like a work in progress for the new what is it, the GLB, the European agricultural
The cap.
the cap, yeah, that thing. From 2023, there will be other measurements and other compensations, I think a bit higher, but we situated our compensations exactly the same amount as they used to with the agri-environmental schemes. But about the weather and the date, like the late mowing, it's set on the 22nd of June, but we are a bit flexible in that. So if it happens that the 24th or 5th they will give a lot of rain, and the farmer asks for, can I mow 2 or 3 days before, then we check if the birds are already left on the field, then we give permission to mow the field, because it's true that it requires a bit of a flexibility, and that is sometimes a problem with the agri-environmental schemes, that it's quite strict. I'm not sure how they will implement maybe a more flexible system into the future, but I think it's very important for farmers that there is a little bit of flexibility. Of course, if the birds or chicks are still on the field, you have to be a little bit more stricter, but I don't know if that is an answer to the question.
I think yes, maybe if it's not an answer, you can redefine the question, but I will move on to the next question because it's related to the first question. Is the premium that the farmers receive sufficient to cover the costs for the biodiversity promoting measures? And then especially also, there can also be losses in a decreased yield of the grassland, or maybe lower nutritional values of the grass. But as you said that you are also following the premium from the cap, I don't know if you know if this is also included or taking into account to set these premiums.
Yeah, normally in our case it's the VLM, a certain government agency that calculates the amounts, and it really depends on what you do. So normally the reduced amount of hay or quality is taken into account. Maybe the biggest challenge that I see or I heard from farmers is when you want to promote the increase of flowery grassland, then they cannot fertilize anymore. And yeah, a lot of especially dairy farmers, I think, have the problem that they need their land for bringing the fertilizer that they have. Otherwise, they have to transport it to someone else or so, and that costs a lot of money. And that is something that is maybe the biggest challenge, I think, for some.
I don't know, Jose, if you want to add something, if you know in Portugal, if they also take this into account or not.
So in Portugal, for now, there are no compensation schemes for tackling this situation, and we have here to look at both the production of hay, harvesting in May, and the production of grain that is harvested by the end of June, end of July. It depends on the region and on the grain. So when we look to the hay, as what we can understand is that I do believe that the compensation scheme and the value that is being attributed, it's not enough. Okay, so and more and that is more explicit now by the prices that the food for animals, the industrial food for animals is rising. So there are lots of people, farmers, that are changing from grain production to hay production so they can feed their animals. And this is a big change in the landscape. And for the protection of this specific bird, there are two solutions. One, it's to rescue the eggs, and the other, it's to really have a good compensation scheme that is suitable for the farmers and applicativo. It's that is interesting for the farmers by the economic point of view. And I think that is not, we have not achieved that. Fortunately, where we work, farmers are we work in a very rural, deep rural region with very desertified region, very few farmers, old farmers. So they are quite, how can I explain? They still work along with nature, more and less. If I make myself understand. And they don't get really unhappy to lose a part of the production if they are involved and engaged and interested in the project, in the conservation of the bird, in having a good relation with all the community. Okay, so in that sense, I do believe that it's impossible to but with a scheme that it's designed to truly compensate the farmer if he doesn't have this availability to lose some income or some profitability. In what concerns to grain production, and that's where we are working in two measures. One, to promote and to value the value, the economic value of the grain by the sustainable production, and we are promoting the traditional varieties that have a niche market, and therefore they are paid a little bit better, and we are working in this sense, and that's why we have partners of the distribution and the commercialization of the cereals that can pay a better price than the normal markets. I think I have answered. No.
Yes.
In fact, I have answered. Yes, it's complex. It's a complex.
Yes, it is. There are also still a few questions for Jane. The most common way that farmers reduce tillage is to use glyphosate herbicide to kill the residual crop. It's a chemical which is known as an antibiotic, so doesn't it cause damage to the soil microbiome?
So I think we didn't do research on that, but I also did once a literature review on the effect of this herbicide on the soil microbiome, and yes, indeed, the studies show that it has an effect, but maybe the problem is that the word damage, because as I told in the beginning, we don't really have good indicators for soil health, so we can measure the soil microbiome, and okay, we can say this herbicide changes the microbiome, but does it really cause damage to the microbiome? I think this is still a question we have to solve. We have to have good biological indicators, and because some people say if you damage one group, maybe another group will take over the function of the other soil microbiome. So I think it's very controversial, and I can only say yes, this chemical changes the soil microbiome, but whether it's really caused damage, I think we still have to wait for better soil biological indicators that are really correlated with soil health.
Okay. There is a next question for Jane. Can you use the fungi-bacteria ratio as a measure of soil health? And if so, how can farmers get access to this test?
Yes, so it is the technique, the first technique I showed is PLFA analysis. There you can measure the biomass of the fungi, the biomass of the bacteria, and then you can calculate this ratio. And I think a lot of labs are doing it. Also at UVO, we do it. If a farm is interesting, they can contact us and we can do it. But also, I think a lot of commercial labs give these tests it's available for farmers. So if you're interested, just email me. I can forward the email to my colleagues.
And do you know about the composted manure, if it's better for promoting soil, the soil microbiome, if you compare it with uncomposted manure?
Based on a feeling, I would think that composted is better because you probably have a more diverse microbiome. But I don't know. I should look up for studies But yeah, the more microbiome, the more microbial biomass you have, the better, and the more diverse, the better. So I would think composted is better. But yeah, I would really should look it up. But yeah, at least in our test we saw that manure manure and compost are both good, so it's not that compost was much better than manure. So.
We within the BovINE project, we also looked at the use of composted manure and not. So you can also find on the hub information on this. So if you just type in the search bar something about compost, then you will find what we already added there, and there's also a link to research. So if you want to know more about this, you can also find something on the hub. Then there is a last question, Jane, but I don't know if you can answer this. If the type of slurry was taken into account to determine if certain types are beneficial, for example, the difference between organic or pig or cattle slurry. And also, if you, I don't think you will know this, the type of concentrates that were fed to the animals.
So yeah, the study I showed was both cattle and pig slurry, and they both worked well on increasing the microbial biomass and had a positive effect on plant health. but I don't know this concentration on the fat on the livestock. So I think there my message from the first slides is that in the past everybody looked to only to the soil or only to the plant. So I think the type of research where you look at the 3 compartments and also look at what happens with the livestock is very important for future research. So this is also something I learned by making this presentation. And I saw a very small question, I think also that changes in bacterial families were found on arable or grassland. I can easily answer this. This was on arable land, so and I think on grassland these changes would be less because on arable land you also have these crop effects. So I think this is a very easy question to answer.
Okay, so then I think we covered most of the questions, and we also went a little bit over time. If you have more questions or a question was not answered, you can always contact us, and then we can provide you an answer. You can contact me or Minerva, and we can make sure that your question will go to the right person. So I would like to thank the speakers for their contribution to this webinar, and I would also like to thank the audience for listening and for asking interesting questions. Thank you all and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a nice
you. Bye bye.